Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. The EU Western Balkans summit in Tivat put enlargement back at the center of Europe's strategic debate, with Montenegro presented as the frontrunner and gradual integration floated as a bridge to membership. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack what changed and what still stands in the way is Spasimir Domaradzki, political scientist at the University of Warsaw and Institute of Central Europe. His work focuses on European integration as well as regional politics. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening.
So taking a look at this summit, do you think that this is an evidence of a genuine enlargement, or is it another one of those political exercises where people come together and talk and not a lot of movements actually happening?
Both. Let me put it that way. On one hand, we indeed have the next Western Balkans EU summit, and on the other hand, we have quite tangible changes when it comes to the nature of the relationship between the countries of the Western Balkans and the European Union. On one hand, we have countries that now become let's say front runners, or countries that we recognize as most with the highest chances of becoming members of the EU, as Montenegro and Albania on one hand, and on the other hand we see also a number of countries facing very serious hurdles on their way towards the EU, like Serbia, like Bosnia and North Macedonia, which actually shows that the efforts over the last 2 years, both of the European Union and some of the candidate countries from the Western Balkans, brought new dynamics, I would say diversified dynamics, dividing the group of candidate countries into those who really see a membership perspective and those that apparently emphasize how important it is to have mobilized and dynamic determination to join the European Union.
Right, and of course, a lot of these countries are based by a country-by-country basis, and we have to look at it case by case as well. Now, like you mentioned, there are some countries that are considered front runners, Montenegro being one of them. If we take a look at the specific countries, the specific case, what are some of the accession chapters or rule of law issues remain? What are some of the hurdles that they have to clear in order for Montenegro to qualify?
For Montenegro, apparently, two things are very important. First and foremost, it needs to accomplish its negotiation process to close all chapters, which is not paradoxically such an easy task. But what is extremely encouraging is that for the first time since 2010, 2011, we have the idea and the decision of the European Commission to start drafting the accession treaty, which is a very important symbol, a very important sign, showing that with the necessary determination on the side of Montenegro, this can be achieved. However, we need to mention as hurdles ahead that we see how Montenegro's membership perspective becomes an issue not solely of this bilateral EU-Montenegro relationship, but also plays a role in the regional international relations. We had recently a very unpleasant situation, another heated moment in the relations between Serbia and Montenegro, after Montenegrin authorities accusing a number of people on board a plane landing in Podgorica, which were refused to enter the country with the suspicion that they can have the goal of destabilizing and actually sabotaging this summit. We have examples how regional politics still has an impact on the integration process.
Right now, the summit also emphasized a gradual integration before membership. Can you help us understand how this will benefit the countries that are vying for membership, and what's some of the things that are realistically achievable in the next few years, and what are some of the stuff that needs to gradually be introduced?
Well, let's put it that way. Actually, the picture is a bit more complex because the gradual integration is a kind of an escape when it comes to thinking about the concept of European integration, and in particular of joining the EU in the context of the inability to achieve the goals fast. However, it also takes into consideration additional challenges related to the fact that also among the EU member states, and in particular within their societies, there is currently little debate, but also little enthusiasm for a prospective enlargement. On the other hand, this approach, which seems to be a kind of an attempt to resolve both the expectation of candidate countries to join and to make sure that there are no political turbulences in the EU is, in a sense, I would argue, quite unsatisfactory, because ultimately the candidate countries want to join the EU, and this gradual integration actually simply extends the road to membership. And we need to remember that when we talk in particular about the countries of the Western Balkans, we talk about countries that are members actually for, that are candidates or waiting for membership already since 2003. And this is a very important element that the European Union needs to take seriously if it wants to maintain its credibility and if it wants to continue exerting its conditionality and its ability to impose internal reforms that bring these countries closer to the EU.
Right, like I mentioned, a lot of these countries have been waiting for quite some time, and this gradual integration is not seen by many countries as satisfactory, saying that this pretty much just put these countries in a limbo to perhaps calm things down. However, do you see in any specific way that things can be sped up? Do you think it's a lack of political will by the part of the EU, or some of these countries still having issues with internal reform or closing some of the chapters that is required?
Yes, the picture is very complex. We need to be aware of several things. First and foremost, we already have the two frontrunners, apparently Montenegro and Albania, but we also have countries with internal challenges. We need to remember that right before this summit, also the president of the European Council made a tour across the region, across the Western Balkans, and he stopped also in Montenegro, in North Macedonia, in Serbia, and what we could see, what is very important, is that that was a clear signal that the European Union continues to apply its merit-based approach, which is supposed to apply equally for all countries, but we also see that the political tendencies in the particular countries are very different. So, for example, in North Macedonia, we have a de facto stagnation of its relations with the European Union due to its internal inability to meet the criteria stemming from the negotiation framework, the preliminary criteria to introduce the Bulgarians as one of the minorities in its constitution. In Serbia, the situation is even more terrifying, because what we have over the last year and a half, or almost 2 years, is a brutal autocratization with consistent oppression of protesters, in particular the students' protests, and in practical terms, activities by the Serbian government that are hostile both to its its neighbors and to the European Union. So we have a very complex picture in which actually the Montenegrin and Albanian experience turned out to be a ray of light in the Western Balkans.
All right, so there's definitely a lot to untangle there, and we'll have to see how this shapes out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.